Hi football fans, my name is Killian O'Grady, the Irish Flying Canary and long-time Norwich City fan. Welcome to the fourth edition of the Beyond the Barclay podcast, focus on travelling supporters, O'Grady away days. In this episode we will focus on Bermondsey and specifically the Den, the home of the Lions, Millwall FC. For many Norwich fans who've been to Plymouth, this will be a much shorter and easier trip for them to the southeast of London. This podcast will hopefully give you an insight into getting to the Den and back home safely and experiencing what it is that part of London has to offer. And given that Millwall will be hosting Swansea next, hopefully this guide will serve as a good guide for some fans from Wales also. There are probably not many of us who are going to fly to the match, unless some of the other international Canaries or Lions fans are planning the trip. London is served by so many airports that there are many options to get there, including Stansted, Heathrow, City and Southend airports. But in my case for this trip, I'll be catching a flight to Gatwick, followed by a train to London Bridge and then connecting to South Bermondsey. I found the trip to Millwall quite easy in recent seasons and have travelled both there by train and by supporter coach from Norwich. Of course, I'm no expert on Millwall, so I'm delighted to be joined by two special guests who can no doubt give us as much better insight. In a break-with format, I've had away day guides up till now with a local team fan from the area. I'm delighted to be joined by a fellow Irishman who does travel to games, a long-time Lions fan from County Clare, the home of Shannon Airport, in the west of Ireland, Gerard Quinlivan, and London-based Canary and member of the Capital Canaries group and columnist with the Pinkin and EDP, Will Jennings. You're both very welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, maybe we'll start with you, Will, and tell us a little bit about how you're a Norwich supporter in London.
Yeah, no, I grew up in Norwich originally. Went to school there. Both my parents are from Norwich. Neither of whom were huge sort of football fans. No, it was around sort of the 2003-04 season. We won Division 1 under Nigel Worthington that I first became sort of a big fan. I was sort of 6-7 years old probably. It was players like Darren Huckabee. The season after, sort of players like Dean Ashton that sort of, really were my heroes sort of growing up. So, I was in Norwich and growing up basically. I went to school there until I did my A-levels. And then, I went to university up in Durham. And now I've been living in London ever since, working sort of sports media and journalism. And still got a season ticket at Carrow Road and get back to, the vast majority of home games. But it's always nice when sort of an away game like Millwall or QPR or something like that comes up because, I'm South London as well. So it's really not far for me to get to the Den. So, very much looking forward to the game on Easter Monday.
Lovely. And Gerard, a Millwall fan in Ireland, that's quite unusual, I'd imagine.
Yeah, not too many of us, Killian. Yeah, so I've been a Millwall fan now for the guts of nearly 40 years at this point. I started following Millwall in the 86-87 season and really randomly landed on Millwall because a good friend of mine was collecting I don't know if you remember the Panini soccer stickers back in the day. Yeah, we went through an entire season of collecting these in secondary school, and I had the album pretty much completed. And my friend Ray said to me one day, "Who do you support?" And I said, "Well, I don't really have a team." And he said, "Well, you can't fill out the entire album and not have a team." So I literally, as randomly as this, I flicked through the album and I landed on Millwall. And all I knew about them was I liked the shirt. I liked the fact that Tony Cascarino and Kevin O'Callaghan back in the day were playing for them. Right. And I thought, well, that's good enough for me. And nobody else I knew supported them. So I started following them from that day on.
Brilliant. And it's been up and down since then for you, I'd imagine.
Been very much up and down. I think as one fellow Millwall fan said to me one time, you don't support a team like Millwall and expect to be a glory hunter. You really have to take the ups and downs along the way. But yeah, there's been a lot of ups, a good few downs as well. But it's been an interesting journey.
Okay, and talking about journeys, when you go and travel to a game, how do you typically get there, and what's your match day ritual like?
So typically I have to fly because I'm obviously based in the west of Ireland now. So I fly from Shannon Airport straight to Gatwick. A bit like yourself, I get into Gatwick. It's usually an early start for me. It's usually like a 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. start. Flying to Gatwick, get in early, and then I'll usually get a train from Gatwick to London Bridge, and then get the Southern Rail train connecting London Bridge down to South Bermondsey. So that's my match day ritual. It's an early start. It's a long day. I brought my son to his first game back in January of last year to an FA Cup match. It's only when you have another person travelling with you really realise how taxing it can be. Look, I'm a committed Lions fan. I've been a committed Millwall supporter now, as I said, for nearly 40 years. For me, it's a real pleasure. It's a real privilege to be able to go and attend a couple of games every season, go and enjoy the game and mingle with some fellow fans.
Brilliant. And what about you, Will? What's your match day ritual like? For a match like this one at Millwall, what do you do on the day?
It's an easy one, really. I mean, it's a home game for me. I've been to Millwall. I was adding it up earlier. It's probably a lot behind Carrow Road. Probably one of the grounds I've been to the most, actually, following Norwich. Probably my 6th or 7th visit there. We normally have a few beers in London Bridge, a pub called the Old Thameside Inn, I think, by the river there. So probably meet there. It's a 3 o'clock kick-off, isn't it? So probably meet there about midday-ish, and then just a short train, obviously, to South Bermondsey and get to the ground. So no, looking forward to. There's quite a few of us going, actually. So a big contingent. Some of the other games we've had recently, Plymouth, Burnley, Middlesbrough coming up. It's a bit of a tough sell going to those ones. All of my sort of mates that live in London and support Norwich will be heading to this one. So it should be a good day out.
Well, absolutely. So we talked about, obviously, the pub you might go to there. What about your end, Gerard? Is there any pub that's popular with Millwall fans?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. I mean, when I started first going, Barnaby was the big pub that all the Millwall fans used to go to before the games, and it was a really popular spot. And I think it shut a number of years ago. I'm not exactly sure when, but I do remember being there my earlier days going to London. When I was a little bit younger and a little bit naiver, I used to venture into all the hot spots. So the Barnaby was always a popular spot. More recently, we tend to spend or congregate more in the Blue Anchor on Southwark Park Road, which is quite near to London Bridge. I know that a good few of the home supporters as well go to Surrey Docks. There's a Wetherspoons down there, and they go for beers. But usually my routine on match days is I'm rarely now in the pubs because I'm such a tight agenda, literally getting into Gatwick, getting to London Bridge, getting out to South Bermondsey. If I've got enough time to get to the line store, the club supporters shop beforehand, and maybe grab a quick coffee, that's about it for me. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of local pubs. I suppose one of the beauties of being a London-based club is you've got so many options available to you. Once you get to London Bridge, I mean, you've got, a load of hostelries near the train station. And look, aesthetically, you get into South Bermondsey, when you walk from the train station down, it's not exactly the most pleasing to the eye in terms of appearance. But, I think what we lack in maybe the aesthetic pleasures, we more than make up for the passion of the fans and the volume when you get into the ground itself.
Yeah, I think it was last year, the year before, I was at the Bunch of Grapes near London Bridge, and that seemed to be a mixed pub. There seemed to be fans from both clubs there, which is took me a little bit by surprise, to be honest.
Yeah,
I know it well there, actually. My girlfriend is next to where News UK are based, where the big newsroom with the Sun and the Times are based, and it's their local pub. So I know the Bunch of Grapes well. It's nice. It's a good pub.
Very good. And a bite to eat then around the Den. What's that like? If you're a bit peckish or hungry.
There's enough options. I was thinking about this beforehand. I mean, you've got the Millwall Cafe right beside the club shop, which it's your typical greasy spoon. I mean, you kind of get what you pay for, I guess, in that part of South London. I personally, because I have a very different schedule to most Millwall fans, personally what I like to do is I like to grab a bite to eat in Borough Market, either immediately before the game or immediately after. I mean, there's a couple of really, really nice restaurants in Borough Market around that area. Like there's a fantastic restaurant called Roast that's been there for probably 20 years. And I always go there. I just really enjoy it. But there's a lot of really good pubs nearby as well that do really good food, like the Barrel Boy and Banker on Borough High Street. They have really good pub grub as well. Around the Den itself, not really a lot of options. I mean, there probably are some local pie and mash shops that you could venture into if you're feeling brave enough on the day, but having tried pie and mash, it's a very acquired taste. I wouldn't necessarily be recommending it high in the list for any travelling fans.
What about you, Will? Is there anywhere that you'd recommend for a bite to eat?
No, again, I'll probably, I'm sort of more familiar with the sort of London Bridge borough area than I am with sort of, around Millwall itself. Again, no, it'd probably be a sort of case of going to a pub. I mean, like you said, Gerard, I know Borough Market quite well. I was there with my girlfriend the other day. There's loads of really nice restaurants there. So if you're a travelling Norwich fan and want a bite to eat before you get the train to South Bermondsey, having got into Liverpool Street, I'd probably recommend looking for somewhere around there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I've always been reasonably impressed with the concourse in the away end in Millwall. The fact that there's an outdoor section, some of the concourses are really crammed, and it's the last thing you'd even think about was eating anything. But I always found it was pretty decent in Millwall. Yeah,
no, the standard of catering at the ground has improved a lot. I mean, if you go back to when I first started following them, and I first went to the grounds, I mean, you'd be lucky to get a cup of coffee on the day. I'm not sure exactly when they started serving alcohol in the ground itself, but I'm pretty sure it was there from early on. The catering and the facilities are really good. Once you get into the ground, you actually have a lot of stalls now. I think the last day I was over, they had like a Bavarian themed German beer hall that they looked like they literally lifted from Cologne or somewhere in Germany and planted it right outside the ground, and they were like doing bratwursts and hot dogs and you name it. So I definitely think that the standard of catering for both the home and away fans has improved. Like I said, aesthetically, getting to the ground, it doesn't look great, but once you're in there, it feels like you're in an enclosure where you're well looked after and you're perfectly safe. And I can't say I've ever been in the away end, fortunately or unfortunately, so I can't speak for what the concourse is like. But I know on the home side, they have put a lot of effort into keeping it reasonably clean and keeping the facilities of a standard that people might reasonably expect to attend a game in comfort.
Sure, excellent. In terms of the atmosphere then, how would you both describe it? We'll start with you. What's the atmosphere like at the away end?
Yeah, no, I mean, the end and the Den in general, obviously, it comes with the greatest respect, Gerard. Obviously, going to the Den comes with a bit of reputation in terms of sort of Millwall and everything goes around. But I really like it there. I've never sort of had a bad experience there or come across any trouble or anything. I always think it's a really good game to go and watch a good sort of old school game of football. I've seen a lot of debate recently on sort of Twitter around sort of Premier League football. It's all a bit robotic and sanitised and stuff. But I feel like if you go to a ground like Millwall, you're getting a proper old school ding dong, a proper battle. I love the pre-match playlist. I love when London Calling plays by The Clash, and when you sing that sort of Mill chant, and it all sort of reverberates around the ground. It's a really good ground to go to, and I think it'll be a really good atmosphere. I think on Easter Monday, the club have kindly subsidised tickets for Norwich fans, all the players and the managers. So I think that will be an incentive for sort of even more fans to come. So I'll be hopeful of, I don't know what you think, Killian, but 2,500-3,000 fans probably hopefully behind the goal. And I think it'll be a really good atmosphere. But it's always a really good ground to watch football. You know, you're going to get a proper old school game, and a bit of sort of antagonisation between the home and away fans. It's probably natural. We've got a decent following like that. But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. I think a really good atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you wrote a piece on that about the subsidising. What's your thoughts on the players and the coaches not subsidising the match?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good gesture. You've been to probably more away games than I have this season, Killian. I've been to about 15 or so, but it's not been an easy ride for Norwich fans following their team away from home this season, and it's been a while since the club made a gesture like this. So I think it was well timed. I think it's a game that we probably would have brought quite a lot of fans to anyway, because Millwall away from Norwich is actually probably one of the closer ones, really looking at the geography of the Championship. And no, I think it's a really good gesture. And if it means that it's a sold out, atmospheric, sort of raucous away and behind that goal, it can only be a good thing. So fair play to Johannes Thorup, Ben Napper and his players, and hopefully it makes for a really good atmosphere, and hopefully they can give us a day out to remember in the capital.
There you go. And Gerard, what's it like as a home fan there?
I think it very much depends on the day, on a couple of factors, Killian. I think it depends obviously on the opposition. I mean, if it's a local rival, like if we're playing Crystal Palace or we're playing West Ham at home, well then, I mean, the noise is going to go off the Richter scale inside the ground. And it also is very much dependent on how the team is performing. I suppose I referenced it earlier. I mean, there's a kind of a bipolarism of being a Millwall fan. You have to expect, and you tend to expect the worst and hope for the best. Honestly, we wouldn't be real Millwall fans, wouldn't consider themselves proper Millwall fans if they were entering into any game in confident frame of mind. But there's just something electric when you get inside the ground. It just takes on an atmosphere of its own, and there's a real tribal, almost primal feel to the ground when the place is full. And I've been lucky enough now to be at a few matches over the years where the ground is pretty much full. You've got nearly 20,000 seaters capacity in there. You've got a full away end. Usually it's the top tier of the away end only, because they obviously want to keep a certain amount of distance depending on the opposition away from the away fans and home fans. There's a feeling in the Den, when the Den is full and when it's really rocking and the team is performing on the pitch, it's like everybody in unison just creates this cauldron, and it makes it really, really difficult definitely for the opposition on the pitch, whatever about off the pitch. I'll go back to an FA Cup game a couple of years ago, Leicester City against Millwall. Leicester were the Premier League champions. Ben Chilwell was playing for Leicester that day. Came out to the Barry Kitchener to take a throw in, and he got a roar from the Millwall crowd, and he decided, sod that, I'm leaving the ball where it is, and he made someone else take the throw in. And one of the Millwall players said to him afterwards, why didn't you take the throw in? He said, you must be joking. He said, I'm not going anywhere near that lot. That kind of atmosphere, I think a lot of Millwall fans play up on that, the fact that we have this intimidatory atmosphere in the ground. But I've been at other games where it's been dull as dishwater. I mean, I've been at midweek games when I've been over in London where you could be playing a midweek league game. There's nothing in it for either team, and frankly, if only 5,000 Millwall showed up and there's a half-empty ground, it could be as dull as dishwater. But that being said, if there's a little bit of a bite in the game, if there's one bad tackle from the opposition, those 5,000 Millwall will sound like 25,000 when they start roaring. So it's a brilliant atmosphere for a home fan. And obviously, you've got the as Will mentioned, the pre-match music that goes on. And I think the best moment of the day for me as a home fan is if they win the game and Rockin' All Over the World comes out in the speakers. Well, then that's like the signal that it's been a good day out. If that music doesn't come on cue, well, then you know that it's not been one of those days, unfortunately.
And in terms of chants, what are we going to hear from the Millwall fans?
Well, I mean, the sanitised ones are going to be, you're going to hear Let 'Em Come. You're going to hear, No One Likes Us. And that's been there since the early 70s. And you're probably going to hear some version of criticism, putting it mildly, of the opposition fans and of the linesmen on whatever side of the ground has made the worst decisions. And I mean, I've been there and witnessed some absolutely horrific abuse and some really funny abuse being hurled at people. It's not a ground that any opposition player or team or supporter would enter thinking, well, it's going to be a cushy day out and we're going to have a nice, pleasant ambience to the ears. You don't go to Millwall expecting that you're going to a tea party. You're going to a ground where, as I said, it's tribal. It's a little bit feral, and in some ways, it's something that I think is missing in the Premier League. You see the Premier League now, and it's so banal. It's so sanitized. It's kind of why we're all hoping that Alex Neil pulls off a miracle and gets us in the playoffs. Because honestly, if we somehow manage to scrape into the playoffs this season, I can see a lot of people in the Premier League getting worried, and I can see a lot of the Metropolitan Police getting worried because they're going to be busy next season if we make it that far.
Very good. And Will, in terms of what will the Norwich fans be chanting here to try and wind up these lines?
Yeah, and I think it entirely depends on the result. I think if we somehow go 1-0 up or winning, I think it will be a sort of can we play every week, or how much you be winning away, or on the flip side, if Millwall are winning and we're sort of resigned to another defeat, it'll be something along the lines of, you have to live here, we get to go home. I've got nothing against South London. I live there, obviously. And I always find those chants quite, my dad's lived in Birmingham and Hull before, and I've gone to Hull and West Brom and Villa, and I've heard similar chants about going home and the place being a shithole, but you just got to sort of suck it up sometimes. But no, I think it entirely depends how the game's going. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Gerard. I love going to Millwall. It's like you said about the Premier League, completely agree. You're getting a proper old school game. At some point, I'd love to see you back in the Premier League. You look at some of the teams up there and some of the nature of the grounds and the atmospheres, and I think sanitized is the perfect word. It's not the same football that I grew up loving, and even you guys probably a couple of decades with the greatest respect before sort of loving. So it's become a bit too robotic and sanitized. And I'd love to see a ground like the Den, a bit like Ellen Road when they went up a couple of years ago. I'd love to see a ground like that sort of hosting Premier League football again. So I think it'll be a really, really good atmosphere, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Cool. And given it's Easter weekend, I'm sure a lot of people will make a weekend of it, I suppose, in around the London area, maybe not specifically in Bermondsey, but any recommendations on places to stay or things to do outside of the football?
It's difficult. I live in Oval. I live next to the cricket ground, the Oval, basically. Right. Other than that, other than your sort of bog standard London tourist destinations, there's not many things I can put my finger on. I don't know if you've got any, Gerard. You could chip in with and rescue me. But
I view it through a completely different set of lenses, because you obviously live in London. For me, going to London is a pleasure because it's a trip. It's a day out to go to the football, but I usually try and build in something around it. So I'm a big history buff, so I love the museums. I love going to, for example, the Imperial War Museum in Lambeth. I think there's a phenomenal place to go. I loved going to see Shakespeare's Bowl on the southern banks or the south banks of the Thames. I love going in around Borough Market. In fact, I love all the markets around that area. There's some really, really nice coffee shops and restaurants, as I said earlier, around that area. But there's so much to do. One of the things that's really a big draw for me going to London is, on an average weekend in London, you've got about 20 different things going on between theatre, restaurants, music, concerts, or whatever. I try and build an outing or an event in around it. In terms of places to stay, Killian, around London, I've been the beneficiary of staying in a couple of very nice hotels in London. I would say that the nicest probably that I've been in recent times is the Shard, right beside London Bridge.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, if you're on a certain budget, it might not be in everybody's within their budget to spend their weekend there. There's a couple of really nice hotels around Southwark. I actually stayed in a very decent travel lodge in Southwark not so long ago with my wife and kids, and it was decent. I just think that part of London, it's so central. You're within easy reach of pretty much everything from a tourist perspective that you would want to do on a weekend in London. So I would be saying to any travelling Norwich fan, if you're planning on making a weekend of it, build something in around the game that you can get to within easy striking distance of London Bridge. And let's be honest about it, with the tubes network and setup that's there's really not that many parts of London you can't access.
Only thing I would add to that, sorry, for a football perspective, has come to mind. There's a really good you mentioned theatres, Gerard. There's a really good player. I don't know what you guys will think of it from an Irish perspective, but there's a really good player called Dear England. It's about Gareth Southgate's tenure as England manager. And I've seen it twice before, but they've recently updated it to include the Tuchel appointment and the Qatar World Cup. And I'm not a huge theatre person, really. I'm just sort of sport. But I went with my girlfriend, who isn't a football person but loves the theatre, and we both thought it was absolutely brilliant. So if you're looking for an activity to do and you're making a night of it, it's in the West End. I think it's fairly affordable. I don't remember paying a huge amount to go. A really good play about football and Gareth Southgate's tenure. So that's the only thing I'd recommend specifically, just from a football perspective.
That sounds brilliant. And in terms of obviously that we talked about the reputation and their atmosphere and the Den. Is there anything from a safety perspective that Norwich fans should be aware of, places not to go or things not to do?
I mean, the obvious one really is, Killian, don't go down the wrong way when you exit South Bermondsey train station. But it's so well signposted. I mean, it's really well set up in terms of, the away fans go in one tunnel and the home fans just follow on down to the grounds. There really isn't. I mean, the obvious ones will be, don't wear Norwich colours in around the Millwall pubs area or around the Millwall grounds. But, I'm of the opinion that when you go to a ground like Millwall, as long as you don't go looking for trouble won't find you. Okay? Yeah. You don't do something ridiculous like going in wearing your away support colours in the home end, or you certainly don't try to get access into the home stands. To be honest with you, though, I've never seen, in nearly 40 years of going to the ground, I've never even seen a fist fight. I think a lot of it, sadly for some, is reputation at this point. It's really overblown. And I suppose depending on what media outlet or what print media you choose to read, you could have a certain stilted view of what Millwall is really like. But genuinely, I think it's a very safe ground to visit. I'd be quite happy to bring, as I said, I brought my son back in January. I've even brought my dad there when he was in his late 60s. The man had never been to a football game in England before. I think the most frightening part of the day for him was when he saw all the mounted police on horses outside the ground. Like, you just don't get that in Ireland, as you'd know. Oh, there isn't. There is no question but that it's a very safe ground for any travelling supporter. They'll have a fantastic day out. Hopefully not too fantastic a day out. But yeah, there's really no safety issues from my perspective. But at the end of that.
And Will, any tips from you? You've been there plenty of times.
I don't really know. Like Gerard said, really, yeah, it's incredibly well signposted, and I completely agree. Millwall comes with, I was talking to some of my mates who aren't, Norwich fans or even massive football fans, saying, anyone want a ticket to Millwall away, fancy coming, and they're all sort of, saying, dangerous day out, gonna have to sort of watch ourselves. No, like you said, I mean, I've got a far smaller snapshot of it than you have, Gerard. You've been there for 40 years, but in my 6-7 trips, I've never seen sort of any trouble. As long as you're sensible, and if you want to go to the pub, probably do it in London Bridge. Get the train to South Bermondsey and follow the signs to the away end, and behave yourself, then it's absolutely fine. No, I think, like you said, sort of a lot of it comes from your sort of green streets, football factory, old school reputations. But no, as a ground, I've never seen any trouble there, and it's always a place I really enjoy going to. Just be sensible and behave yourself.
Yeah. Apart from everybody hating you, Gerard, is there any real rivalries that you look forward to?
I think the unquestionable one, it depends on your age as well, Killian. I mean, for the real old Millwall supporters, older generation than my own, West Ham were the big rivals and still are. I mean, every year when the third round of the cup draw is coming up, you literally have every Millwall fan itching for West Ham, either at home or away, because that's the big draw, that's the big rivalry. In my period of following them, Palace originally, back in the 80s, would have been the big rivals. Charlton to a lesser extent, because Charlton are kind of have yo-yoed up and down between the divisions. I think it's the most one-sided derby in the whole of British football. Millwall Charlton. It's been like something like 14 years since just Charlton actually beat us.
That sounds like I can think of.
Well, yeah, Ipswich is longer than that for us.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Similar.
But it's actually interesting. Like the rivalries that have developed over the years, more recently for Millwall, have actually come against teams that geographically have nothing to do with London. For example, Leeds. Leeds is a huge game now. I mean, you have Leeds at home in the Den. It would sell out 3 times over because in most Millwall supporters' eyes, Leeds are seen as a huge rival. It probably stems back to the time when Leeds were a force back in the 60s and 70s and obviously developed a reputation. And the thing about coming to Millwall is that if you're a club from the north of England and you're coming down south, you're coming down to London and you're thinking you're in for you think you're going to walk all over the locals, you're going to find out pretty quickly you're not, either on the pitch or off the pitch. They have a lot of rivalries, but on any given day, any potential club has the potential to become a serious rival, depending on how well things are going.
So to just wrap up on one final question around exports I want to ask about the comment from Norwich. I'm going to ask you first, Will, and then ask Gerard and Alex Neil. He obviously brought us all the way through Wembley and maybe could do the same for Millwall this year. What are your thoughts on him?
For me, he was brilliant. I mean, that season, I mean, the sort of speed in which he galvanised the team and the dressing room and sort of taking over in January and, catapulting us into the playoffs and obviously winning at Wembley. And, I think that day at Wembley, I mean, alongside maybe a couple of Derby Day victories and perhaps Leeds away in 2019 is probably my most memorable and favourite day being a Norwich fan. So I think even though he wasn't at the club for a huge amount of time and obviously we ended up going down under him, sort of. He obviously was in charge for most of that season. Afterwards, I think, what he did in delivering us that day at Wembley and in the playoffs and, getting that team, to do what he wanted them to do as quickly as he did was seriously impressive. So, only fond memories of Alex Neil and, good to see him sort of, making a good sort of early impression at Millwall and fingers crossed he can do a good job for you guys as well.
Gerard, your impression?
Delighted to say that we have Alex Neil as our manager. Whenever I see Alex Neil being interviewed, all I think of is Napoleon. He reminds me of that Napoleonic phrase of lucky general. And I just think in Alex Neil, he has that kind of lucky general streak about him. The first thing that struck me about him is the players that we would have discarded halfway through the season before he arrived have suddenly improved their performance to the point now where one of them is already in the running for player of the season. And I'll reference 2 in particular. Joe Bryant at left back and Billy Mitchell at midfield. If you and I were talking a year ago, I would have quite happily binned the 2 of them and sent them off. But this season, since Alex Neil has come in, both of them are virtually unrecognisable as players. I don't know if he's going to do it this season. I think the run-in is a little bit tough. But it was very telling after the win away at Sheffield United. Alex Neil was interviewed and he said, somebody made reference to the fact that he had been successful in the playoffs before. And he said, I'm really looking forward, he said, to taking this team to the playoffs because he said, I know how to get through them. And I like that confidence. I like the fact that he's not tempering expectations. He's actually saying to us as supporters and I presume to the players in the dressing room, you know what, with 5 games left to go, we've nothing to lose, we've everything to gain. Let's have a go at this. And I love that.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully you do have a decent run in towards the end. Maybe not so good on Easter Monday, but we'll see. Listen, thank you both very much for joining me today, and we'll enjoy the game against Millwall.
Thanks, Kid.
That's it for this episode of Beyond the Barkley. Thanks so much for listening. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review if you enjoyed the show. You can also catch all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you've got any questions, stories, or topics you'd like us to cover, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, on the ball, City.